Hi there, welcome to this episode of OtherNetwork Conversations. I'm Federico Martelli and I am part of the OtherNetwork team. For this episode, we are recording from Berlin in Germany. OtherNetwork is a project that seeks to emphasize the importance of independent art spaces worldwide, connecting hundreds of different artists, curators, and cultural practitioners through an online platform, as well as an offline program of events, exhibitions, and in-depth editorial content. Despite operating in very different conditions, many of the art spaces featured in our network are exposed to common challenges and share many of the same successes. These spaces offer refreshing counter-narratives to mainstream cultural institutions. So we want this series to unpack the behind the scenes of what it really means to run independent project spaces worldwide. To do this, we are normally using the idea of the relay. So for each episode, we feature a representative of one project or space and ask them to invite a guest, either from inside their own network or somebody that they are curious to learn from, as we try to understand the complex dynamics of running art spaces and projects in different contexts. So in this episode, we are in Berlin talking online with Mukenge and Lydia Schellhammer, who are joining us from Kinshasa to discuss their project Laboratoire Kontempo. I am joined in Berlin by Dzekashu MacViban, a Cameroonian curator, writer, editor, and publisher based here, who will talk to us about their upcoming long-term and extended research and exhibition project in Kinshasa, done in collaboration with Laboratoire Kontempo. So to start the conversation, I wanted to first speak with Lydia and Christ. So Lydia, maybe if you guys can introduce yourself, explain a bit your own practice, and I think we would be really interested to understand the genesis and the beginning of Laboratoire Kontempo and how it exists through the city. I forgot to mention also that given the fact that in Kinshasa the main language is French, Chris speaks French fluently, and this is his first tongue. And we want to test this episode to do it a bit bilingual, no? So Lydia will be constantly translating to Chris the conversation and back and forth because I don't speak French. So I think we are testing kind of how can we have a bilingual conversation, and I think that's also an interesting thing to test, given the nature of the project that you are doing. That is a lot about communication and conversations and oral practices. So. Lydia, maybe you can start introducing yourself.
Yes, thank you. I will start with the translation of what was said, like briefly at least. Donc, merci Federico pour notre public francophone. Il s'est présenté Federico Martelli de OtherNetwork, une plateforme qui veut connecter des espaces indépendants des artistes dans le monde entier. Et voilà, qui nous invite Dzekashu MacViban, étant curateur et chercheur et écrivain, qui est avec lui à Berlin. Et moi, Lydia Schellhammer et Mukenge à Kinshasa, représentant les laboratoires Kontempo. Et on commence à nous introduire et introduire les projets et oui.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Moi, c'est Mukenge. Nous sommes duo avec Lydia. Nous travaillons depuis plus de 6 ans maintenant. Et ce projet Laboratoire Kontempo, nous l'avons monté en 2019. C'était pour la première fois que ce projet a vu les jours, étant Laboratoire Kontempo. Et ce projet elle-même, l'idée de base, c'était de mettre en place on va dire des opportunités, des espaces, tout en collaborant avec des espaces culturels ou encore des structures qui présentent ou qui font des projets artistiques.
So we are an artist duo consisting of Mukenge and Lydia Schellhammer. The duo was founded in 2016, but we are working together already since 10 years. And we founded Laboratoire Kontempo in the year 2019 in Kinshasa as artists, an artist space for artists, by artists, especially because of the lack of platforms that we felt that could represent our artistic work in the way we wanted to.
Oui, l'idée de base de ce projet était de partir, parce que nous-mêmes, en premier lieu, nous sommes artistes, mais on avait remarqué qu'il y avait un grand souci, un grand problème à Kinshasa, parce que toutes les, on va dire, les espaces ou les plateformes qui peuvent donner l'occasion ou l'opportunité aux artistes de présenter leur travail ou qui ont des financements, la plupart, ce sont des institutions, on va dire, européennes ou occidentales ou, voilà, ou américaines. Ce ne sont pas des institutions qui sont basées à Kinshasa.
So when we started this project, we had this problem in Kinshasa that we felt ourselves as artists that we always have to connect to institutions to like fund our work or to present our work. And the institutions that are able to present and to fund artist projects in Kinshasa at that time had mostly been European or Occidental, Western institutions. So we always had to kind of connect to those institutions to show our work.
Et c'est à partir de là que nous avons mis en place la structure ou je dirais plutôt la plateforme, nous l'avons mis en place. Mais pendant que nous l'avons mis en place, il n'était plus question que de présenter pour nous-mêmes, donc, c'est-à-dire la pensée, les réflexions, les possibilités, les collaborations commençaient à s'étendre, à s'élargir. Donc, il fallait commencer à voir aussi plus loin que ça, non seulement sur notre propre travail, mais voir aussi sur l'opportunité que la plateforme donne même à d'autres artistes et à d'autres chercheurs ou écrivains, théoriciens.
Yeah, so we founded this platform to be able to function independently somehow. And when we started it, we felt that it is not only us that are like needing, have a need for a platform like this. And we felt that also for other artists and for researchers and art practitioners, it was very helpful or like interesting. So the project got larger and we invited different people to join us. And so it became more like a collaborative work in the years.
Mm-hmm. Kinshasa has been always a bit of a reference point for our project too, no? OtherNetwork. I visited Kinshasa to install the exhibition of Wolfgang Tillmans a few years ago. I think it was the first exhibition of the tour. Kinshasa has always been like a place that has like a very important role in how we structure a bit and thought about the necessity of something like another network, a platform that connects independent spaces, because specifically the conditions, the urban conditions are very different in a place like Kinshasa, no? So I'm wondering if you could expand a bit on how the city works culturally, what are the main entities, who are the main players, how does the city works in general, and maybe how artists are like actually doing work and relating kind of this work to the city itself.
Donc, Federico dit que même pour lui, Kinshasa, c'est un point de référence même pour fonder son projet de OtherNetwork parce qu'il était là pour monter l'exposition de Wolfgang Tillmans. C'était pendant son tournée en Afrique, une des premières villes là où ils ont monté l'exposition. Et c'est là même ils ont eu l'idée de fonder ce projet OtherNetwork parce qu'ils ont senti qu'il y a plusieurs espaces culturels, il y a des artistes actifs, il y a des espaces indépendants. Et voilà, c'était pourquoi même l'idée est née de faire ces réseautages. Et il nous demande si on peut parler un peu plus sur les réalités de la scène, comment elle est structurée et comment les artistes fonctionnent. Pour comprendre un peu mieux dans le contexte dans lequel Laboratoire Kontempo a été créé.
Oui, si on parle de la scène, nous devrons dire que, par exemple, pour nous, je commence d'abord de la scène avant d'arriver sur la question de Laboratoire Kontempo. Par exemple, pour nous, la scène elle-même, si on doit parler d'elle-même, de la scène de Kinshasa, on doit dire que c'est une scène qui bouge beaucoup, qui a beaucoup d'énergie. On peut trouver plusieurs artistes qui ont des pensées ou des réflexions énormes qui, je pourrais dire, la scène artistique de Kinshasa, elle est tellement enrichissante. On trouve tellement beaucoup du savoir, beaucoup de talents et même des personnes qu'on peut dire qui sont à peu près des génies, s'il faut les dire. Et voilà, c'est à base de ça, comment dire, observation que nous avons eue qui a fait qu'on commence à penser. Pendant cette observation, nous avons aussi remarqué qu'il y avait souvent des problèmes, on va dire, un constat était que l'art visuel elle-même, quand elle se mettait en place par des artistes, au moment de soit une traduction ou des articles, tout de suite, on remarquait qu'en dehors même des structures ou des institutions européennes qui financent, mais on remarquait que les articles, les pensées autour du travail, les contextes du travail étaient réécrits par des Européens ou des Occidentaux.
So Kinshasa is a very interesting city looking at artists, because there are a lot of artists and very talented artists. You can even say genius artists. So of course, this is one of the reasons why this project was founded. But also the other reason is that the context that the artists are working in, comment tu as dit, le contexte que les artistes travaillent, il fait que c'est plus les Européens qui écrivent.
Oui, voilà, je disais que l'art visuel est produit à Kinshasa, les artistes travaillent, mais quand il s'agit au moment de contextualiser le travail ou au moment de rendre ce travail visuel dans un certain cadre d'une pensée, là, on retrouvait qu'en ce moment, ce n'était plus une perspective congolaise, ça devenait des perspectives occidentales.
Okay, so the artists are working and they are producing work, and they are producing very good work. Just when it now comes to frame the work or put it in a context or theorize the work, it is often made by Western people, like especially Europeans, and it's not made by Congolese people themselves.
Oui, et je pourrais encore ajouter quelque chose. Nous pouvons imaginer une ville qui engorge entre 17 et 20 millions d'habitants. Qu'est-ce qui peut être comme énergie? On peut comprendre ça. Et la scène artistique, elle est tellement grande. Donc, à travers tout ça, c'est là que nous avons commencé à repenser, à revisiter qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire d'une plateforme si on les met en place. C'est-à-dire, nous avons commencé premièrement à réagir et on s'est dit, premièrement, mettre en place une structure ou une plateforme qui donne aux artistes une place pour présenter selon leurs pensées et leur théorie ou leur travail. Et en deuxième position, il y avait une autre chose qui suivait, que nous avons dû se mettre d'accord, c'était aussi de faire appel aux, on va dire, aux théoriciens ou aux chercheurs ou aux experts congolais pour qu'ensemble, ils essayent de structurer ou de mettre en avant les pensées ou les réflexions qui sont basées ou qui sont autour de l'art visuel au Congo ou à Kinshasa.
Yeah, so based on this observation, we started to work with theoreticians and researchers that are local in Kinshasa. You can imagine a city of 17 to 20 million inhabitants. It's so huge, and there are so many artists and people working, living in there, that it is very rich to create a platform like this. And so to avoid having this theorizing aspect that is coming from the outside, we started to connect with local people that can do this research and theory production to work with us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And maybe could Could you describe a bit the more in practical terms the functioning of the cultural system? How would you describe it?
Ok, est-ce qu'on peut écrire un peu mieux ou un peu plus précis le fonctionnement de la scène culturelle ou de la structuration de la ville en termes de la scène culturelle aussi? Okay, yeah, I think what is very interesting is that there is the biggest art academy of Central Africa in Kinshasa. So there is a huge scene of visual artists in terms of governmental funding, for example, or funding in general for the art scene. It's mostly made by European institutions, as the government is not really putting in place funding for artists, especially for visual arts. So the scene is very dependent on European institutions like the French Institut, Institut Français, the Goethe Institute, or the Wallonie-Bruxelles, which is like the Belgian art center. And of course, they are having their programs and they are putting in place topics and inputs that artists should work on, which creates this dynamic of artists being oriented by topics that are implemented by European institutions instead of working on their own topics. So I think this is one very important part. And on the other hand, there is like a segregation in the city already itself, in its architecture, in its structure, that there is the administrative part of town where also most of the European cultural centers are located, but where people are not living because it's like a administrative part which was already put in place by the colonial organization at the time, during colonial times. So the people are not living there, so it's also not easy to access. And in the same time, there are all those independent art spaces in the parts of the city where the people actually live. And that's also, I think, a very important part, peut-être en français avant que je parle trop. Donc, il y a cet aspect déjà qu'il y a l'Académie des Beaux-Arts de Kinshasa, qui est une des plus grandes académies des Beaux-Arts dans l'Afrique centrale, ou la plus grande, n'est-ce pas? Et qui fait, bien sûr, qu'il y a énormément des artistes visuels. En même temps, il n'y a pas assez de financement du gouvernement pour surtout les artistes visuels, qui fait que les artistes visuels sont beaucoup dépendants de ces institutions européennes qui sont là, l'Institut français, la Wallonie-Bruxelles, le Goethe Institut, etc. Et qui fait aussi que les thématiques et les cadres que ces institutions proposent font que les artistes sont créés plutôt dans ces cadres-là, au lieu de se baser sur leurs propres thèmes, ils s'orientent vers les thèmes qui sont proposés par les institutions qui financent. Et en même temps, ces institutions sont dans une partie de la ville où il n'y a pas de gens qui habitent, parce que c'est un peu la partie administrative de la ville qui était déjà mise en place par le système colonial. Mais en même temps, il y a dans les quartiers, maintenant là où les gens habitent, il y a plein de centres culturels locaux qui organisent aussi leurs programmes.
Because I remember when we started doing research for OtherNetwork, trying to figure out like a bit the art scene in Kinshasa, like independent art spaces, there was a really long list of like independent art spaces, but at the same time they had like really kind of a precarious existence, no? So a lot of them, like for example, they are still a bit in the list, but they kind of disappear or they morphed into another, no? The kind of the infrastructure is really fluid, and in a way that fluidity also is almost beneficial too sometimes for like a kind of the type of art production that the city produces, no? Like a bit artists are like also seem to be kind of used to this fluidity, and this fluidity also is generative too, because these spaces were like really fluid, no?
Il constate que pendant que lui il était à Kinshasa, ils ont aussi visité plusieurs espaces, comme on vient de le dire, qui existent, des espaces locaux, espaces culturels locaux. Mais en même temps, il constate qu'ils ont commencé à faire la liste de ces espaces-là pour leur réseautage de OtherNetwork. Et il y en a plein, il y en a beaucoup, mais en même temps, ils peuvent aussi disparaître rapidement. Donc, il y en a beaucoup, ils apparaissent, ils peuvent faire 1 année, 2 ans, 3 ans, mais après, ils disparaissent aussi encore. Donc, il remarque une certaine fluidité aussi dans ce sens-là, qui est peut-être aussi un aspect dynamique qui fait que les artistes sont habitués avec une certaine fluidité et d'être pas trop focusés sur un espace, mais plutôt qui restent dans la fluidité et ce que ça crée aussi une certaine dynamique dans la scène.
Oui, je pense que c'est l'observation de Federico tout à fait normale parce que très souvent, il y a un gros problème à Kinshasa, il faut le dire. Que déjà, premièrement, il faut aller par la question d'abord sur les espaces. Comment les espaces mettent en fonction euh, les centres culturels ou les lieux de rencontres culturelles. Il faut dire que ces lieux culturels, si elles vivent après, au bout d'un moment, elles disparaissent, c'est parce qu'il faut dire aussi que ils n'ont pas, on va dire, des manières, des subventions où ils ne trouvent pas de financement qui fait en sorte que l'espace culturel peut tenir à long terme. Ce sont toujours, bien sûr, ils reçoivent des projets, mais ce sont des projets où très souvent ils sont toujours court terme. Ce ne sont pas des projets à long terme. Donc, cela fait que si cet espace loue euh, un endroit pour loger les activités. Mais au bout d'un moment, s'ils avaient des courtes périodes de financement, il se peut qu'au bout d'un moment, quand il n'y a pas, l'espace va fermer. Ou soit encore, la- les bailleurs qui louent cet espace, au bout d'un moment, si il n'est pas d'accord avec peut-être, ou s'il veut changer son prix de loyer. Donc, tu vois que tout de suite, c'est la fait que l'espace culturel n'a même pas le temps de faire une deuxième proposition. Ça va faire que l'espace va mourir tout de suite parce qu'ils n'ont pas des subventions à long terme.
Okay, so there is one problem that is in Kinshasa, like a reality in Kinshasa that is creating this reality of spacing that are popping up and disappearing. It's because there are fundings for like projects, but there is no long-term funding for these spaces. So they might get some funding for a certain project, set up the space, they rent the space, and they start the activities there. But once this funding is gone and they don't find another one, they have to close down, or maybe the rent is going up and the higher price they can't pay anymore. So it's also based on this economic reason that those spaces appear and disappear. Yeah, because you said that it's created certain fluidity, and I think even Laboratoire Kontempo is a child of this reality because it is not a fixed space. It is a platform, but it's like a platform that is connecting to other spaces that are there, and every year a different one, and it can change all the time. So it's also kind of a result of this reality that there are so many initiatives that they come with great energy, as you said, and so it's great to use this energy, but in the same time, yeah, you cannot be sure that next year the same energy will be in the same place, but maybe this energy is moved to another space, so we have to connect to this other space. So it's not so much connected to physical spaces, but more to people that are actually holding up the energy. So Laboratoire Kontempo is basically connecting to people, not to physical spaces.
So maybe this is a perfect moment to give like a synthesis of what was the initial impetus, and how would you like describe it as a large project?
Okay. So first of all, Kontempo is a move. It's not like a word that we founded. It's a word that already existed in the scene. It's actually a movement. Donc, il demande si c'est le bon moment de demander aussi comment le projet a eu lieu, comment on a fondé ces plateformes, Kontempo, oui, comment on a fondé le Kontempo. Et je viens de dire que Kontempo, c'est pas nous qui l'ont fondé, mais Kontempo, c'est plutôt un mouvement qui existe déjà dans la ville et qui a juste donné le nom à la plateforme. Peut-être tu peux en dire plus par rapport au Kontempo lui-même d'abord.
Oui, le content pour nous, on utilise juste un nom qui existe, qui a été déjà créé par un mouvement de plusieurs artistes qui ont étudié à l'Académie de Beaux-Arts Et voilà. Si je dois brièvement expliquer ou parler des Kontempo, Kontempo, c'est juste une manière dont les artistes à Kinshasa se sont réappropriés la manière de dire l'art contemporain, mais dans un certain contexte local de Kinshasa, dont ils trouvent l'art contemporain selon leur vision et dans la manière dont comment ils le font. Donc, pour ne pas tomber encore dans la problématique de la définition du mot contemporain, comment elle est décrite, parce qu'il y a certaines règles et principes ou comment elle est définie occidentalement. Donc, les artistes ont appelé contempo, c'était juste pour signifier une manière de faire l'art contemporain, mais dans leur contexte, en fait.
So Kontempo is a word that came up in a framework of a students' movement at the Art Academy of Kinshasa. And it was basically a way to say, to do contemporary art, but in a way that makes sense in the local context. So they take the word of contemporary art and change it to contempo to say that they do contemporary art, but they do it in their context and they don't have to refer to all the definitions that are made by the Western orientated international art scene that are already like classifying and structuring the art, but in a way that doesn't probably make sense in a local context. So contempo is just a way to say doing contemporary art, but out of a local context in Kinshasa.
Oui, si je veux ajouter, c'est juste pour dire que je pourrais juste ajouter que c'est aussi, moi je trouve que c'est aussi une manière d'une réinterprétation. Dans quel sens? Ils prennent on prend quelque chose qui existe et on va la recoder dans un contexte où les gens connaissent comment ça fonctionne et comment faire avec.
So it's more of a reinterpretation or a recoding of something that everybody knows it exists, but yeah, it changes its way of understanding.
It's not a location, but it's more like a platform, right? Like you are kind of using it, taking this as an initiative that is actually generating things, no?
Donc la question est que est-ce qu'on peut expliquer un peu mieux c'est quoi Laboratoire Kontempo, parce qu'on a compris Kontempo c'est ces mots-là qui circulent dans la scène, qui étaient comme un mouvement aussi des étudiants, mais voilà, aujourd'hui Laboratoire Kontempo c'est une plateforme, et est-ce qu'on peut un peu expliquer mieux il s'agit de quoi?
And actually, I love the fact that it's actually called Laboratoire Kontempo, no? I think it says a lot.
Il aime aussi que c'est appelé laboratoire. Yeah, so as Chris said before, it's like very much based on our own experience as artists. So when we started it was this need to show work in a space of independence and liberty. Like, the thing is, we still get funding from European institutions, but it's us that are setting the topics and the things we want to work on. So we started this as artists ourselves, and like when it was growing, of course, other artists added their vision and their ideas. So basically, it's a platform that brings together artists and researchers and theoricians that can help us categorize, contextualize our visual work as visual artists. Because if we don't do that, it will be made by people that are not living in Kinshasa, that are like having an outside view, which always creates stereotypes and like very limited understanding of the work. So the platform was created because of this urge to control the narratives somehow. And so today, we are organizing different projects every year. At least we try to, and we invite different people to join us and to create synergies between visual arts and different other theory practices.
Oui. Et je voulais juste ajouter aussi que, voilà, Laboratoire Kontempo, aujourd'hui, ce qu'elle fait, c'est non seulement pousser la théorie ou mettre en connexion ou en conversation la théorie et l'art visuel qui est dans une perspective locale, mais aussi Laboratoire Kontempo invite, même si c'est des personnes qui ne sont pas congolais ou qui sont, par exemple, occidentales, mais il est plutôt question de voir une élaboration à ce niveau-là, c'est-à-dire ne pas amener une perspective sur un contenu à laquelle on n'est pas, mais c'est plutôt d'entrer en conversation avec les personnes locales pour essayer d'apporter une réflexion sur ce point de vue-là, parce qu'on vient d'un autre côté, donc on arrive dans un contexte, on peut essayer de pousser la réflexion qui est dans le contexte local et non changer les perspectives. C'est plutôt vraiment ça que je voulais ajouter.
So it's also this not only bringing together visual arts and theory and research, but also really putting local perspectives in front, like taking the local perspective as the point de départ, as like the starting point. Even if we invite other people, they are always starting from this local point of view, and then we can go further. So it's really also this, value the local perspectives.
Okay, I think then this is a perfect wrap up for the first part of the conversation, no? Before we start talking about your upcoming project together with Dzekashu. So thank you so much. Now we're joined by Dzekashu MacViban, a Cameroonian curator, writer, and editor based in Berlin. That you guys, Laboratoire Kontempo, Lydia and Chris, you are working together for a while now on an upcoming exhibition and extended project in Kinshasa. So maybe I ask you first, Chris and Lydia, if you could introduce Dzekashu to the audience and how started kind of this collaboration.
Donc, ça c'est le bon moment de partir à la deuxième partie de la conversation qui sera avec Dzekashu MacViban, le curateur du projet qui va commencer bientôt à Kinshasa. Et nous, on peut présenter un peu Dzekashu, lui introduire à notre public. So I start in English and then I translate. So yeah, actually this project, it is an outcome of conversations we had with Dzekashu actually about our artistic work, because Chris and I are working on a lot on like translation, not only like translation of language, of course, which is also an important part of our daily life and work, but also about visual translations, also about translations that are like intercultural, but also things that are not translatable. For example, like, as Chris was talking about, artistic traditions that are probably coming from Kinshasa, but that are not understood elsewhere or that are not even recognized. And actually, we had this problem when we started to show our work as an artist duo internationally. Like in the last 2 years, we started to show a little bit more also in Germany, but also in other countries. And we had this problem that especially in Europe, art is perceived more like based on references. So our public would look for references, where, especially in painting, as we are painters, this is like the first access point for our European public. And like, of course, they would look for references that are part of their reality, but our references are probably not part of their reality. So especially when they are from like the local context in Kinshasa, and so we had this problem, how to translate work if the references are not known, what are the access points of interpretation. And these are conversations we had with Dzekashu. And so we had this idea about this project where we could put like art theory from Kinshasa more in front, and art theory in Kinshasa is basically more made orally, like most of the time. So yeah, that was the starting point of this project. Ok, en français. Alors, ce projet est né un peu aussi dans l'idée de notre propre travail artistique étant duo. Comme on est des peintres, on a commencé un peu d'exposer aussi en Allemagne et en Europe, et un peu plus au niveau international. Et c'est là où on a constaté un problème de traduction. Donc déjà dans notre travail, la traduction, bien sûr, et dans la vie quotidienne fait partie, la traduction de la langue. mais aussi la traduction maintenant interculturelle ou par exemple aussi des aspects qui ne sont pas traduisables, comme par exemple voilà, les contextes ou des contextes, des scènes artistiques. Donc, il y a aussi des aspects qui ne sont pas traduisables s'ils sont très connectés à un contexte. Et ça nous a donné cette idée-là de créer ce projet parce qu'on a eu le problème que nos références dans notre travail artistique à nous-mêmes ne sont pas reconnues dans l'espace international parce que, voilà, ils ne font pas partie de la réalité de notre public et qui nous a donné cette idée-là qu'on doit rendre visible aussi ces références-là en général. Et à Kinshasa, vu que la théorétisation de l'art est très orale, on a eu cette idée de ce projet que Dzekashu va parler plus de ça.
Okay, but maybe now the Dzekashu, thank you for joining us here in Berlin. Very nice also to see you in person. Tell us about like what you're doing recently. What's your relationship with the topic? No, like I think it's interesting that you are like also already working quite a bit in curating, relating to language and how you found yourself in this project.
This it's been quite interesting listening to the conversation so far, and to jump directly into how I fit into all of this. So as you said earlier, I'm a writer, curator, editor, and publisher, and as a curator, for me, it's very important to reflect a lot on centering different kinds of knowledge production in the work that I do, because of course the different kinds of knowledge productions that exist in different kinds of contexts, and these don't always exist or coexist in the same spaces. And so for me, it becomes important to think about how this is possible on the one hand, but also to think about the ways in which different kinds of artistic disciplines can come together and inform each other. And somehow this is reflected in the way in which I think about or theorize art and literature, in a way that my influences usually go across different kinds of disciplines and different kinds of knowledge productions. And in the past years, I guess I've been having a lot of conversations with Lydia and Keays about the work that they do, about Laboratoire Kontempo, but also about Kontempo itself. And I must say the art scene in Kinshasa is very, very unique. And quite often when people try to interpret or theorize these art scene, they usually use a very specific prism. So they use a very specific Western prism to be able to interpret this kind of practice or discourse. And this doesn't always work, because artistic practices in Kinshasa, of course, like in different parts of the world, are the product of so many specific kinds of influences. And to be able to really unearth or unpack these kinds of artistic productions, you need not only to understand the context, but you need to navigate it with a very specific kind of language. And so in the case of artistic production in DRC, we realize that there are a lot of conversations, there are a lot of different kinds of ways to approach and theorize art, but these are not always done in written form. Because again, this is linked to so many other kinds of complications, but also context as well. It therefore becomes very important to think about ways in which languages can be created, which are very specific to a local scene. And for example, Jean Kamba's definition of Kontempo, which Lydia and Keays earlier spoke about, becomes very relevant here in the way in which this definition gives a language to a practice. It gives, even more than a language, it theorizes a practice in a way that can be understood by really positioning Kontempo as something that on the one hand exists between different kinds of movements, but it's also playful, it's also absurd, it's also very much rooted in Congolese kinds of performative traditions. And if you think about these realities, and then you think about the kinds of conversations that I've been having with Laboratoire Kontempo and Lydia and Chris, it became very important then to think about a long-term project that simultaneously thinks about creating space for production, but also, on the other hand, creates equal space for the theorization of these artistic productions in a way that they can go hand in hand.
Ok. Bon, je peux faire un résumé en français, c'était un peu long, mais je vais faire mon mieux. Dzekashu va me compléter si je rate. Donc, lui étant écrivain et curateur, il a rejoint ce laboratoire Kontempo pour un projet en long terme qui réfléchit autour de comment pas profiter, mais comment utiliser les pratiques locales de la théorétisation qui sont souvent pas reconnues ou pas vraiment documentées ou pris en considération. Et voilà, lui étant écrivain et curateur du Cameroun, il connaît bien sûr que dans différents contextes, il y a des différentes manières de la production du savoir. Et c'est ce qu'il faut aussi toujours respecter et réfléchir sur ça, quelle réalité il y a dans quel contexte. Et voilà, donc, il doit rejoindre les projets pour faire cette recherche-là aussi. Dans quelle manière on peut faire intervenir ces pratiques qui existent déjà à Kinshasa, surtout orales, à théorétiser l'art visuel. Parce que bien sûr, il faut produire des œuvres, mais voilà, comment maintenant les marier avec la théorétisation et comment les rendre en contact avec ces pratiques orales qui existent déjà.
Yeah, maybe to continue from what I was saying earlier, in a way that it's very important to think about a kind of discourse between artistic practice and the theorization of this artistic practice in a way that also creates a kind of unique and local agency for this practice and discourse. And of course, when you think about how it's important to create a discourse that fits a very specific kind of context, one then begins to think about what possible ways exist to theorize art in DRC, for example, especially in a way that draws from already existing forms of knowledge production, already existing discourse. And when one thinks of it like this, oral forms of literature can then be positioned as a kind of theoretical framework. And by oral forms of literature here, I mean proverbs specifically. Because when you think about it, these proverbs usually carry philosophical kind of undertones, but also cultural and linguistically relevant undertones. Therefore, the idea is to think about a way in which one can then draw from proverbs or center proverbs because of the kind of philosophical undertones that they have, and use these as a kind of argumentative or theoretical framework when interpreting different kinds of artistic practices that are specific to different regions, say, for example, here in the DRC. And in a way, this is almost what Kontempo does by giving a language that is very unique. So by creating a kind of unique language that matches a unique kind of artistic practice.
Je fais un résumé encore en français. Alors, l'idée du titre du projet, c'est un proverbe. Kokende Liboso Kokoma, c'est un proverbe. Et ça rejoint déjà cette question comment théoriser l'art avec des pratiques qui existent, notamment les pratiques orales comme les proverbes par exemple. Et voilà, c'est un point de départ pour expérimenter aussi avec différentes formes de théorisation de l'art. Et ouais, je pense, j'ai bien résumé ou il y a un aspect que j'ai raté.
And I think it's important to explain to the audience too that like basically you are together organizing kind of an exhibition, an extended project. No, it's not just an exhibition. No, it's more like an extended project through the city in Kinshasa, right? You've been preparing for this project for like already more than a year, I think, no? But now you're in Kinshasa literally to take care of this project that is very ambitious, no? There's a lot of things happening. You are inviting many local artists to participate. It's not happening only in one location, as I understand. No, it's happening in many places. But it's not only visual art, but also performance and events and conversations. No, the project is titled Kokende, Liboso, Esa, Kokoma.
Ouais, je pense que, comme on disait avant, il y a des choses traduisables et des choses non traduisables. Bien sûr que on peut essayer de traduire, mais voilà, peut-être que si on traduit dans la langue française ou la langue anglaise, elle peut prendre d'autres formes ou d'autres compréhensions. Mais je vais essayer, ou je vais pas traduire, mais je vais plutôt expliquer les contextes du terme ou de la phrase.
So as we said before, there are things that are translatable and there are things that are not translatable. And of course, a proverb has a lot of meanings and interpretations. So maybe if I translate it to another language, it will become something different, but I will do my best. And instead of just not only translating, I'm going to explain.
Oui, Kokende Liboso eza Kokoma, c'est un proverbe que les gens utilisent dans différentes situations et contextes. Ça veut dire que on peut l'utiliser pendant un moment quand nous sommes, par exemple, en groupe, nous avons besoin de faire quelque chose. Il est question de se soutenir ou de ne pas être seul, mais d'être plutôt en équipe ou en union pour arriver à faire quelque chose.
So the proverb is used especially if we are trying to say that we are having a common goal and we have to support each other to reach this goal.
Et il y en a vraiment plusieurs. Je peux donner un deuxième exemple. Dans un deuxième exemple, c'est peut-être que il y a une personne qui est là, on va dire, qui est peut-être égoïste, qui a juste besoin de faire quelque chose seul, mais voilà, peut-être que cette chose seule, on peut pas le faire. C'est pratiquement impossible. Il a besoin certainement d'une association des autres personnes. Mais là, en ce moment, lui, peut-être la personne ne veut pas le faire, mais il a certainement besoin d'une association quelconque ou d'un renforcement ou d'un appui quelconque.
Si tu traduis littéralement, ça veut dire?
Si je traduis littéralement, ça veut dire que on peut aller vite seul ou on peut aller en avant toute seule très vite, mais cela n'est pas synonyme d'arriver ou d'être les plus rapides.
Okay, so it can also be used to describe a situation where somebody tries to do something himself or herself, but it's obvious that they can't do it themselves, so they need support, but they try to do it alone. So if you translate it like literally, it would say to go ahead doesn't mean you have arrived.
And maybe to add that, again, there's a lot of reverberation between this proverb and other proverbs in different parts of Africa. For example, there is the proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, you need to go with people. And so when you think about it, there is so much philosophy that can be unpacked from these proverbs. And of course, proverbs are, in addition to being a kind of form of knowledge that has been passed down across different generations, they are also very, very contemporary and like used in contemporary discourse. And here, for example, there is this quote that is attributed to Papa Fumoeto, who's a Congolese artist, and the proverb says, à Kinshasa, quand on devient trop logique, on devient illogique. And so the idea is, again, to kind of borrow what Chris said, not everything can be translated, so I can contextualize it and explain. And so the idea here is that at times when you try to do everything in a very specific way, it doesn't always work, but you also need to give space for a certain kind of spontaneity. And this is also something that is very rooted in the way in which things happen in Kinshasa, in the sense that you need to not only be spontaneous, but you need to adapt to so many different things. And so if you stick to a very precise kind of logic and you're not malleable, then you become illogical at the end. Maybe just to add again that, for example, proverbs as an analytical framework is not a new thing. So this is something that has been theorized by philosophers and academics. Here specifically, I'm referring to Cletus Umezingwa, who's Nigerian, and he has theorized a lot about proverbs as a form of analytical framework, and he draws a lot from Yoruba oral traditions. And so this is something that already exists in a way as a framework, and what we're trying to do here is to adapt it to the language of visual art or spatiality. And of course, it's important to point out that there are, again, so many different types of knowledge productions or different types of knowledge that exist or coexist in the case of Kinshasa. And of course, a part of the art scene is always effervescent in the way that it changes, but there's also quite established traditions that can trace their lineage from different kinds of local movements as well. Like there are so many different kinds of movements that were created to challenge previous kinds of movements. And this is the case in Kinshasa, where you have so many movements that either occur as a continuation or as a breakaway from other previous movements. And of course, all of these exist or coexist with, again, more conventional or traditional kinds of artistic practices.
Maybe if you can expand how you're trying to bring that into like the visual and spatial, no? How this idea is being applied into the actual project.
Yeah. So it's first of all, it's a multidisciplinary project, and so it's not exclusively a visual project. And so in the way in which the project is set up, in addition to having visual artists, we also have art critics, we also have spoken word artists, and we have other kinds of thinkers and writers as well, who are all part of the project. And the reason why it is set up like this is in such a way that there is always a kind of, there are always different entry points into these. And so in a way, what the proverbs do are more like providing entry points into the ways in which you can analyze different kinds of art. For example, when you think of a proverb, it's not just a proverb, but it has a philosophical underpinning. And so it's more about this philosophical underpinning that can then be used to unpack a kind of discourse. And so it's not that you're taking the proverb or you're creating a kind of database of proverbs. No, it's more about using the kind of underlying philosophy that exists in proverbs, because again, these are very much specific to the kind of discourse that is produced. And so this creates a kind of conversation then between the proverbs that unpack the discourse and the existing artistic practice.
Okay. Alors, pour résumer un peu ce qui a été dit en anglais, c'est plutôt maintenant pour la mise en pratique de ce projet, de cette idée de base d'utiliser l'écriture orale pour théoriser l'art et pour créer créé une théorie autour de la production visuelle. Donc, Dzekashu a encore souligné que les proverbes comme moyen des recherches, ce n'est pas nouveau. Il y en a déjà des chercheurs qui l'ont fait. Ce que nous on fait, c'est plutôt de maintenant les lier à l'art visuel. Et en faisant ça, on retrouve aussi des couches philosophiques qui sont transportées par ces proverbes-là, par exemple, qui peuvent nous ouvrir une porte pour contextualiser la production visuelle. Mais en même temps, ça se limite là, mais ça se limite pas là parce que on n'a pas invité que des artistes visuels, mais il y a aussi des gens qui vont nous rejoindre, qui sont des artistes, par exemple, les spoken word, donc slammer, par exemple. Ça peut être aussi des chercheurs, des critiques d'art, des écrivains. Donc, il y aura des gens qui vont nous rejoindre dans ce sens-là. Donc, c'est plutôt un échange entre l'art visuel et cette production des savoirs écrits ou oral. Et maintenant, il est un peu question dans la pratique comment ça va se faire, comment les artistes ont réagi par rapport à ça. Et voilà, si on veut ajouter quelque chose par rapport à ça, et comment étaient les réactions des artistes qui travaillent déjà et tout. I think what I can start to add is that it was something that was very easy to introduce because almost all the artists that we already started to work with, they already do that. It's not something that we invent, but they already do it. It was just not really considered by researchers or something. So, for example, we have artists that use languages actually in their work, like they combine visual art and language themselves already. There are artists that already collaborated with people like with slammer or with musicians or with people that are using sound or oral practices. And basically also most of the artists that we invited because of that, because they already do it. So I think it's going to be very interesting to really point out how this is already something that is very rooted in the art scene, but never really, was never really put in front probably. Donc, moi, j'ai plutôt ajouté que c'est les artistes qui travaillent déjà, c'est des artistes qui ont déjà cette pratique-là de combiner l'art visuel avec des formes différentes d'écriture orale ou de l'écriture. Donc, soit ça mélange directement l'art visuel et l'écriture, ou eux-mêmes, ils ont déjà collaboré avec des gens, des slammers ou des poètes ou des artistes, des écrivains. Donc, déjà, le choix des artistes, c'est basé sur cette idée du projet.
Oui, je pense que c'est vrai parce que nous, ce qu'on fait, on va dire qu'ensemble avec Dzekashu qui curate, ce que nous on fait avec les curateurs, c'est plutôt de mettre en avant, on va dire mettre en avant quelque chose qui existe, mais qui n'est pas, on va dire peut-être qui n'est pas reconnu ou que les gens ne tiennent pas compte de ça. Parce que la scène artistique elle-même à Kinshasa, elle est surdouée de l'oralité, il faut le dire ouvertement. Elle est surdouée de l'oralité et on ne doit pas aussi ignorer que cette oralité fait en quelque sorte partie aussi de la culture, même elle-même de la culture locale de Kinshasa ou du Congo. Donc, on voit qu'il y a une certaine théorie qui existe oralement et voilà, ensemble avec les curateurs, on essaye juste de, élaborer plus et mettre ça juste en avant. Les artistes sont déjà en plein dedans, on va dire c'est leur quotidien, ils vivent de ça chaque fois sur la question de l'oralité.
Yeah, so Chris points out that as Dzekashu said, and as I said, that what we are doing is not inventing something new, but mostly putting in front what is already there, because this combination of visual art and theory oral theory or oral theoretization. It's something that is done in Kinshasa. So it's something that is rooted very deeply in the culture in general. Like oral traditions are very rooted in the culture in general. And in the art scene also, these oral practices are very common. So it's not, but they are not recognized as like art theory. So what we are doing is mostly just, putting in front what is there and recognizing is it as art theory. So that's what.
And how many artists are you inviting, and are they all based in Kinshasa, or are you trying to also bring other artists from abroad, from other places?
Like for this first step, the exhibition in Kinshasa, we have a lot of local artists, but we also have guests, but we won't tell the final number and names now. This is coming soon, all those informations. Very soon.
Mm-hmm. But you have a bunch of like local artists already participating. What can we expect?
So there are a few artists that are already starting producing new work for this project, and some work are already in the selection process, like work that already exists. And so what you can expect is very soon in December, part of like an exchange that is also going to be part of the theoretization. So we are also going to register conversations between artists and writers or researchers or art critics. So in December, we're going to have 10 days of exchanges that we are going to partly register and make part of the exhibition and the online platform. And then in January, we are going to have a multimedia exhibition where we are going to show what artists are producing. We are also inviting performers. We have already some traces of these oral traditions that we are wanting to use as art theoretization. And after that, there is going to be a catalog produced and an online platform where you can also see everything that is part of the project. Peut-être encore en français, donc qu'est-ce qui vous attend? Donc, ils vous attendent en décembre déjà, il y aura une première partie du projet qui sera la partie d'échange, là où on va inviter des artistes d'échanger avec d'autres, avec des critiques d'art, avec des chercheurs. Et on va aussi enregistrer plusieurs de ces conversations, déjà comme première étape d'utiliser la culture orale comme théorétisation. Donc, des conversations qui vont aussi apparaître dans l'exposition ou dans la plateforme en ligne. Et puis, en janvier, il y aura l'exposition multimédia dans 3 différents lieux à Kinshasa. Et suite à ça, il y aura un catalogue et la plateforme en ligne là où les projets seront aussi présentés.
Wow, it's super ambitious. It sounds like really amazing, and I can't wait to see it. But so now artists are producing. You are starting with some kind of conversations now in December, but then actually in January, then you, Dzekashu, are going to Kinshasa, and that will be, I guess, like an important moment that kind of the curator is there. You will have a kind of moments of conversation with artists. Are you going to have like some kind of public program? What is the plan for January?
So in January, there's an exhibition opening in multiple locations. So at the Institut Français, at the Académie des Beaux-Arts, at the Plateforme Contemporaine, at Mukenge. So it's like really different kinds of spaces that also think about different ways to engage with different kinds of audiences. And of course, in addition to this exhibition opening, there's again going to be other discursive parts of the program which would continue both before and after the exhibition opening.
Yeah, because I think, I mean, what I can get from what you're saying is that also it's not happening all in one moment, no? And it resembles, it mirrors a bit the fluidity also of the scene in Kinshasa, no?
Yeah, it's in a way the project in itself is very malleable in a way that also reflects the artistic scene, the kind of way in which the scene is able to constantly either reinvent itself or like shape shift depending on different things. And so there would be different interventions across different months. And again, like you mentioned at the beginning, this is quite a long-term project. And already last year we had research and discursive parts of the project as well.
And the idea also, well, first I think is, if I can say anything, I would love that this gets as documented as possible, because I think we really want to see it. I think there's not many people that have the possibility to travel to Kinshasa, and I know the project is mostly for the Kinshasa audience and for the Kinshasa crowd, but I cannot help but be super curious, no? So it would be amazing if there's like documentation, but on the other hand, we're also trying to figure out ways in which, like with OtherNetwork, we can also platform a little bit the ideas behind the project, no?
Yeah, of course, like our first public is the public in Kinshasa, but we are also having these different forms of documentation where we are going to produce a publication, but we are also having the online platform where we are going to publish not only the projects that the artists are doing, but also, registered conversations, videos, texts. So it's like probably a second exhibition online somehow, so that also internationally the project can be seen and followed. Yeah.
And maybe just to add that the project announcement is available in English, French, and German on different platforms as well. And in a way, we're also quite aware of the importance of documenting all these different parts, and also quite aware of how important language is. So we really approach it with different languages, because again, it's a multilingual kind of project.
Okay, but well, I think I can just basically congratulate you, and I think it's very exciting. I can't wait to really see the results, and we want to like catalyze as much as we can through what we have created in OtherNetwork. Thank you so much, Lydia and Chris.
Thank you.
And we stay in contact.
Yes, please.
And thank you so much, Dzekashu. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
And see you soon. Good luck with everything.
Thanks.
See you soon.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Thanks for listening to this episode of OtherNetwork Conversations. If you enjoyed it, you can subscribe for more on your favorite podcast app. You can also read more of our original editorial content and browse event listings for hundreds of independent spaces online by visiting othernetwork.io. OtherNetwork is a project initiated by Keays together with IFA, Institut for Auslandsbeziehungen. This conversation series is generously supported by Between Bridges Foundation. It is produced and hosted by Federico Martelli and Colin Keays, with sound design, editing, and production by Jack Bardwell. Original music is also by Jack Bardwell. OtherNetwork's research team includes Abraham Tete in Accra, Samantha Modesignana in Johannesburg, Camilo Quiroga in Bogotá, Camila Alegria in Santiago de Chile, and Mateus dos Reis in Sao Paulo.